I'm Dominique DiPrima. Yes, we are live and local, and we're going to talk about whatever it is that's on your mind. Got a scholar here. Like to have people around here that are quite a bit smarter than me to help sort things out. He holds a Moores Professorship of History and African American Studies. He's done research on racism, all kinds of different issues, including labor relations, politics, civil rights, international relations. He's written extensively about the film industry. You can find his books. Now you find them online at Amazon.com. I guess you can go to SO1's bookstores online and order them there. He is a professor of history at the University of Houston and also on YouTube. You can put Dr. Gerald Horne's name in and find a bunch of his lectures. Good morning, Dr. Horne.
Good morning to you.
Well, first let me ask you, how are you?
So far, so good.
Yes, and me as well. So far, so good. It really is an unprecedented time in so many ways, isn't it?
I'm afraid so. I mean, look at the New York Times this morning. There's an article about the Disney Corporation, which, as you know, is a juggernaut in terms of the entertainment industry, controlling ABC, ESPN, cruise lines, theme parks like Disneyland. They're borrowing $30 million a day. I don't see how a business can remain afloat borrowing $30 million a day. And in fact, what this points to is how this coronavirus is going to not only upend the U.S. economy, but I would say upend the entertainment industry, which is so essential to Southern California. For example, how are you going to film TV shows and movies with the kind of social distancing or physical distancing? What does that mean for camera persons? What does it mean for talent agencies? What does it mean for directors? What does it mean for actors? What does it mean, for example, for the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach when there's going to be a slowdown of exports from Asia, particularly China, to the United States, where the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach are the central entry point for those exports from China, particularly in light of the fact that China-U.S. relations are headed down.
Yeah, so I mean, beyond the actual disease, do I wear a mask? Do I not wear a mask? You're talking about a massive and also lingering economic impact that, we are. I'm not sure whether it's official or not. Officially, we're in recession. Are we officially in depression yet? Because if we're not officially, we unofficially are.
Well, certainly the latter is the case. Certainly, I think as of now, I think it's fair to say that the unemployment rates have reached levels not seen since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And also, what this moment points to is how dysfunctional the politics of this country has been to this point. That is to say, if you look at the current senator from Florida, Rick Scott, who was governor a few years back, he designed an unemployment compensation system that was designed not to work because supposedly that would discourage people from applying. And so now you have many people in Florida who never thought that they would be unemployed. They're confronting this dysfunctional unemployment compensation system where the website crashes, where people were put on hold for hours, etc. But it was designed that way. And that's part of this anti-government psychosis, which goes back to the former governor of California, Ronald Wilson Reagan, which then he took into the White House in 1980. And we've been laboring under that psychosis ever since. And I would also say that his particular phrase that he's notorious for, that is to say, the phrase you should be afraid of is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. That encapsulates why it's going to be difficult for the United States to recover from this crisis, particularly compared to the European Union, which has a stronger social safety net. And what's interesting about the safety net, and I'm speaking of Social Security, unemployment compensation, universal health care, etc., it's that it's like having a spare tire in your trunk when you drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. The United States has been the equivalent of a driver that says you don't need a spare tire. Why tie up your capital in a spare tire? In fact, trying to destabilize others who put a spare tire in their trunk. This kind of dysfunction has to end before we can go forward.
Yeah, it is kind of a good point to make in terms of refocusing our attention as much as possible on the election coming up in November, because when you're in the middle of this type of a crisis, it really spotlights the weaknesses and strengths of any administration, and I think the rest is self-explanatory in that sense. I want to talk about some of the stuff that's going around online, because I'm on WhatsApp from our trips to Africa. And, sadly, we've had to cancel, obviously, our trip to South Africa this year, postpone it. We're hoping to go in 2021, as South Africa has imposed all these travel restrictions, and the U.S. has a level 4 travel alert, meaning basically if you travel, they won't help you. If you're stuck, you're on your own. So we've had to shut that down. But I'm on WhatsApp because I met a lot of friends in Africa, and a lot of people internationally communicate for free on WhatsApp. Meanwhile, on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Twitter, a lot of stuff is circulating that I consider to be somewhat true or, factually, incomplete, which makes it even more dangerous, because you look at it and you say, well, I know part of this is true, so all of it must be true. In particular, there's a lot of stuff going around about blaming Bill Gates for this whole thing, saying that there was, not just that there was this conference, which apparently did happen. It was just a roundtable sort of simulation of what could happen in case of a pandemic, which is not all that strange and eerie. But the fact that people are saying he has all these investments in vaccines, that he is trying to profit off of vaccines, or that he is trying to be the hero by coming out with a solution, or that he's trying to impose some kind of world domination through sort of these restrictions and martial law. And that's the first pillar, I guess, of these kind of online conversations, which I think are based on half information, is the Bill Gates conversation. What would you add to that?
Well, what I would add to that is I understand the dilemma that you're underlying, because as Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has said, when you have billionaires in a country, and in many ways that's a social and a policy disaster, that a system that creates billionaires obviously is creating a lot of poor people as well. But having said that, I think it's unfortunate that you also have a system whereby people are set up to make money by basically preying upon the weaknesses and the debilities of others. What I mean is that Bill Gates is an amateur virologist. That is to say, he reads virology textbooks. He's given lectures on YouTube about infectious diseases. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds the University of Washington's department that has been monitoring this healthcare crisis since it began, has been putting out the best numbers, along with Johns Hopkins, as to how many people might die, for example. And it's also true that Bill Gates has been running around with his hair on fire, warning about an infectious disease pandemic, which we're now involved in. And so I understand how people take these disparate facts and then stir it up and come up with this particular theory. But I think if they're looking for a villain of this piece, they should look no further than the Oval Office. And let me point you to the article that appeared in the New York Times just yesterday about the failures of the Trump regime when it was faced in January and February with this crisis. And rather than confront it and take the measures that were necessary, the Trump regime was more concerned about his popularity ratings. And as a result, it seems to me that the country is going to pay a very stiff price. So if people are looking for a villain, point to Donald J. Trump.
Yeah, I mean, understood. And but what's ironic, Dr. Gerald Horne, is that a lot of these conspiracy theories, and not all of them are conspiracies. Like I said, I think some of them are just incomplete factual conversations. It's ironic because a lot of what's happening is this sort of blending of the far right and the far left. Because I'm hearing people that I know are progressive repeating theories that are being incubated on 4chan and 8chan, which are far right-wing Nazi, really, fascist sites. And the weird thing, it reminds me of the last election where, the anti-Hillary Clinton frenzy met in the middle where, black nationalists and right and left-wing progressives were overlapping the things they were saying with the things that you were hearing from the alt-right. And I think we're at a moment like that right now with this disease, and I'm not sure how to stop it or how to shine light so that we can not have what happened, in 2012. In 2016, happened in the 2020 election.
Well, I think that's a fair point, because I think what happened in Wisconsin just a few days ago with the Wisconsin primary, where the Wisconsin State Supreme Court, which is dominated by the right-wing Republicans, in league with the U.S. Supreme Court, which is dominated by the right-wing Republicans, forced people to leave their homes, violating the rules concerning physical distancing, put on gloves and masks to go cast a ballot, overturning the Democratic governor of Wisconsin's attempt to have mail-in ballots. And since that time, as you know, the occupant of the Oval Office has railed against the idea of mail-in ballots, although it's a possibility, I'm afraid to say, that as of November 2020, we will still be facing a pandemic, and it might be useful and pragmatic not to go to a voting booth, where there will be scores of people gathered. But this is the problem, I'm afraid to say, that we're facing right now.
All right. Folks already calling in, which is great. Let's go to Carl from Culver City. You're on with Dr. Gerald Horne on the front page. Welcome.
Good morning to both of you. Yeah, my question is, why is it that Donald Trump is pushing so hard to get this government money to rich companies so they won't go bankrupt? Have to file bankruptcy. Is it? Am I on the right track? I'm seeing him push it to give these rich companies.
I think you're on the right track, Carl. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Wasn't it Dr. King that said this country is about socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor?
Oh, absolutely. It's just like the story I just told about the unemployment compensation system in Florida, which can be said with regard to many unemployment compensation systems nationally. At the same time, these Boeing, which designed this airplane that crashed, killing hundreds over the past year or so.
Long before the coronavirus, with nothing to do with COVID-19.
Right. And of course, they're lining up to get their super steroid infected stimulus check. So this is a system under which we labor. And until we have a system whereby more people are politicized and where politics is not just outsourced to a handful of people who are working day and night, and that's what, in part, has led to this present crisis where people are locked up in their homes.
What would happen if we just said, forget the airlines. Why do we want to bail them out? They won't even give us leg room. They want to charge you for peanuts, and now they want us, the taxpayers, to bail them out. What would happen if we just said, forget you. You sink or swim on your own, just like you expect the average American family to do?
Well, I guess the response from the airlines would be that for a country like the United States that stretches 3,000 miles from the Atlantic to the Pacific, that it's useful to be able to send business persons from New York to Los Angeles. But I think what you're really driving at ultimately is that if the government is going to give these airlines money, then why aren't unions represented on the board of directors of these airlines? Why are the airline executives given 7-figure, 8-figure salaries for not being able to foresee what people like Bill Gates have been talking about for months, if not years? I think that's really the fundamental question. Why not restructure the airline industry?
Yeah, okay, I can see that. I also can see, like, you guys want to play. You guys say that the market is so great, that the market supports, success. Then live or die by the market. If that's what you want the American people to do, you do it too. Guess what? I guarantee you another airline will spring up. Somebody's going to make that money. It's not just that we're not going to have airlines anymore. Let's go to Dee Dee from L.A.
Hello?
Hi, Dee Dee.
Hi. I'm going to speak on a lot of different tangents because I have to speak as fast as I can. The first thing I want to say is that the test scores are going to go up out of this world. And part of that, I'm going to speak on a lot of different tangents. Bill Gates actually has a charter school in Los Angeles Unified School District. I'm a former teacher in LAUSD.
Okay, breathe. You're talking a little too fast. I know you're trying to do a lot. But
I know, but there's a lot that I need to say.
I need you to breathe because otherwise we're not going to listen to anything you say. Okay?
Okay, so I'm a former teacher in LAUSD. I was fired because I was a whistleblower. I told about some administrators who were coaching children who were administrators at Miramonte. They received $500 million, and they financed the Leaving Neverland movie with Michael Jackson. Also, let me just say this: the test scores are going to go out of this world because the students are going to actually receive instruction. In 2001, when President Bush passed the No Child Left Behind Act, it made the schools accountable for instruction, but it also eliminated the teacher credentialing system. And a bunch of people were able to get into the system because they didn't have to have credentials. They have a new system, but they no longer have to have the education that they needed before. So what's happening is that oh God, what was I going to say? Okay, so I was going to say that the online learning is going to be monitored. So the teachers union is trying to stop them from showing videos because the students are going to have to actually get it instruction. That's why the test scores are going to go out of this world. They're going to get so high because the students now will have to get real instruction. They're going to have to revamp the system, and it's going to help the whole system. And that's why they're going to have to revamp the whole system because it's being monitored now. The teachers union is trying to stop it. They're trying to stop them from showing videos so they can, because a lot of the teachers don't even speak standard English. And how are they going to show that? And there have been lawsuits already. I mentioned one, but there's been another lawsuit where.
Okay, Dee Dee, thank you. That's a lot. Thank you. She said a lot. She's got a lot of theories about the school district. She thinks people aren't teaching because they are not showing videos. I seem to remember the teachers showed videos when they just wanted to do something else. But Dr. Gerald Horne, do you want to respond to anything that Dee Dee's saying? We started out the show today talking about the impact of this socially distanced schooling, which as a mom, I really think it sucks. And I'm not necessarily blaming the teachers or the schools, but clearly they were not ready for this. And many of our homes are not equipped with, high-speed internet and all this stuff. So I feel like, this makes the achievement gap bigger. And I'm not sure what we do about it other than taking matters into our own hands as parents.
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. There's a lot of hype about online learning, but what's not factored into the equation is, do students have laptops? Do students have Chromebooks? Do students even have mobile phones to access the content, educational content online? And that even doesn't get to the question of whether or not your online signal is adequate and is rapid enough to download material. And I think she mentioned Bill Gates, too, and that's one of the demerits on Mr. Gates' record, because he has been a major force pushing for privatization of public education. And, Dominique, you are correct to suggest that not only did local school boards not necessarily anticipate this pandemic and then what had it led to, but colleges, too. As a matter of fact, a lot of colleges are going to go out of business.
Really?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, look at all these private colleges that charge so much tuition, and yet they've sent all their students home. It's unclear whether or not they'll be able to invite their students back by August or September. That's going to put a lot of teachers in the unemployment line and the educational administrators as well. And then many of these private colleges are heavily dependent upon foreign students paying full tuition, which then goes to subsidize U.S. students who don't pay full tuition. But with these travel bans, it's going to be particularly difficult for Chinese students and students from South Asia to access these private colleges in the United States. So look for a number of them to go belly up.
That's a great point, especially considering that, I mean, if you look at schools like USC, the number of students coming from China alone is huge. Private paying full tuition. And I noticed that USC is already offering a relaxed admissions in the fall. It's still going to be hard to get in there, but relaxed admissions, meaning they're anticipating this drop in foreign students and trying to find a way to get butts in the seats.
Oh, absolutely. But USC, I'm relatively sure will survive. But then again, if you'd asked me a month ago, I would say, well, Disney would survive. And now I think that's an open question. So, as has often been said, to the point of cliche, we're in uncharted waters right now. It's unclear where this country and where this world is now going.
We've got Morris calling from Long Beach. Good morning, Morris.
Good morning, Front Page family, and kindness, joy, love, and happiness to all within the sound of my voice. Dr. Horne?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's on. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Horne, your book, The Counter-Revolution of 1776, I think every person in this country needs to read that book because we have a misconception of that war of 1776. And I got a question for you, sir. If racism, what is the difference between racism and evil? And if racism is evil, and if we are a racist country, would that also make us an evil country? I'll take your comments off the air.
Well, thank you, Morris, for the comment. Let me say the check is in the mail with regards to your praise of my book. And it's difficult for me to dispute that equation you just drew. Because, I mean, let's face it, we're talking about genocide against Native Americans. We're talking about mass enslavement of Africans. And let me also make one more brief point, which is I have a book coming out in a few weeks that takes the story back to post-1492 up to the English invading what they call Virginia in 1607. And it's a complicated story that I won't try to summarize here, but basically go to Esalen and order that book now. It'll be out in a few weeks. It's called The Dawning of the Apocalypse.
Okay, so, as far as this logic about, is racism evil? Yes. I agree with Neely Fuller. Racism is equivalent to white supremacy. I don't throw racism around as a word that goes both ways or many ways. Racism is white supremacy. I think there's such a thing as bigotry and ignorance that can apply to other situations. But, I think that you can have a situation where there are evil doers and there are evil concepts. You can even have, cancerous, horrible infections at the root of something and still doesn't make the whole tree terrible. I love my country. I do. I consider myself a patriot. I love the blend of people from all over the world. I love the fact that what my ancestors built on this land, which is why I'm going to, keep holding out for my 40 acres and a mule. I love our Constitution, especially when it's actually implemented. And I like all of the amendments to it. I actually like our country. I would like to see a larger, more diversified Supreme Court with shorter terms. I would like to see the end of racism and white supremacy and all of its policies, the way that they're sort of baked into our institutions. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do. I don't think we have a country that is just an evil country. I don't. I think just about any country in this planet, while true, we are a superpower that's done more harm than many, but every country on this planet has evil and good. It's just about the balance. Dr. Horne. I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Well, yes, there's the balance. I mean, for example, I don't think Dominique DiPrima is evil. I don't think Morris, who just called in, is evil. I don't think I'm evil. But I think that when you look at a complex organism like the United States of America, and when you begin to weigh liabilities and assets, I will never be able to push from my mind the fact that hundreds of years ago in California, that land was occupied by indigenous people who mostly been wiped out. It's difficult for me to gloss over that. It's difficult for me to ignore that when it comes to assess the United States of America.
All right, we got to take a break right here, but we'll be back with more conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne. I want to get your take on the 5G conversation, too, because that's another big one online. And I don't think I'm quite done asking you about Bill Gates either because, we have a caller on the line. Well, that will do just that, so maybe I don't have to. We'll take your phone calls when we get back. We'll continue our conversation with Dr. Gerald Horne, looking at COVID-19, novel coronavirus in a worldwide, global, historical, and in the news landscape, all of those perspectives on deck. Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.